Off top, earwax is made up of dead skin, sweat, and fat. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
Welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. I'm joined, as usual, by our lovely co-host, Charlie the Vanilla Snack Kravitz. What up, buddy? We just saw a basketball game, well, most of a basketball game.
I thought you were going to call me Sugar Cookie.
Oh, I forgot that was your new nickname. My bad. Shout out to Suge, my man Suge. What's up, Suge?
Not much. I feel real dumb.
Yeah, let's celebrate me, how right I was.
I'm not going to celebrate you.
Why not?
I'm going to say I feel real dumb. We spent a lot of this postseason sort of questioning why the Celtics wins were not more aesthetically pleasing. And they came out in game one, and they were smothering offensively and defensively of the Dallas Mavericks. Do you feel like all this was repeatable on both ends for the Celtics?
Yeah. That's the worst part about this is like maybe, I mean, obviously Luka and Kyrie at some point could put together a game, but this, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think it's over for the record, but this is amazing. It was an amazing performance by the Celtics.
I don't think it's over. Like they lost game 2 to the Heat and to some other bad team that wasn't good enough to compete with them. So they could lose, obviously, but I do think, and part of this is confirmation bias, is I clearly thought the Celtics were better than them and that they were going to have no issue winning this series, and it looked like that today. The Mavs were able to fight back and make it close, so they're a good team, but I think what jumped out to me more than anything is watching this game felt a lot like watching Dallas against Minnesota, where on one end of the floor, Dallas had no trouble against Minnesota getting good shots and scoring. Then on the other end of the floor, Minnesota seemed so labored when they were just hoping and praying that Anthony Edwards could take over or that Cat would get hot. It felt like that tonight when I'm watching Dallas come down on their end of the floor and try to score. It's like Luka is working so hard. Like he called for a sub.
First quarter.
In the first quarter. He's
3 minutes
exhausted.
left in the first quarter, yeah.
And they're just working so hard to get okay shots, whereas on the other end, the Celtics are passing around and getting wide open threes. They missed like 6 of them in the first half of the first quarter. They missed like 3 on one possession, and they were all good shots. And that's what we were saying while we were watching is like, they're not going in, but these are good shots. Then they started to go in, and then they brought in Porzingis off the bench, and it was just like Porzingis wasn't even, he was just shooting over people.
The Porzingis minutes were incredible. He was blocking shots. It was conceivably, I guess, an elbow jumper that was contested, but it's not because he's 7'3", and then he hit the 2 30-foot threes, and it was such an energy boost for that team to bring him in and him to play that well. Yeah, I mean, the threes, if the Celtics are going to shoot twice as many threes as the Mavs and make them at a higher percentage, the math doesn't math for it to be in the Mavericks' favors. But what I thought was interesting also was Boston's defensive game plan. You talk about how they smothered them and made things so difficult. You know, Luka's loved creating corner threes and throwing lobs. In the first half, Dallas had 0 lobs and 0 corner threes. That's crazy in the modern NBA when you have Luka, who's maybe the best decision maker with the basketball at that wing position we've seen since LeBron.
And we talked about this on our last show, how important the corner threes were to the Mavericks and how good the Celtics were at corner 3 defense. Luka, the thing is, the corner 3 often is created because you have ball handlers who are able to penetrate, draw double teams. They're able to compromise your defense.
Thanks, QB.
You're welcome. However, if they could never quite compromise the defense, then they don't actually have an ability. And this is where all these switchable, great on-ball defenders, like it never quite, even though Kyrie hit some tough shots and Luka.
Yeah, Kyrie's mostly a ghost.
Yeah.
Most of that game.
And Luka hit some step backs early in this game that were like pretty. It was never like they're just working their guys, getting to the paint and causing a help defender to come, which causes the rotation to lead to a lob or to a wide open corner 3. It just boils down to like great on-ball defenders all the way down that roster. Even when Kristaps got switched on to Luka, he held up in on-ball defense.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Bontemps tweeted this out. Luka's never had fewer than 2 assists in a playoff game and didn't have fewer than 3 in a game this entire season. He had 1 tonight.
Jeez.
So that's clearly a defensive game plan of being, don't let this guy pick us apart with the passing. We're fine with however 30-plus points he scores in a game. I think that the Mavs will play better. Like they missed a lot of shots. They will adjust. So I'm not stunned by that. But do you want to hear a crazy Celtics stat?
Let's hear it.
The Celtics this season, they only got to a 29-point lead in game 1 of the finals, but they had more 30-point leads than 10-point deficits this season. John Grandy tweeted that out. It's just like this team, because we debated whether or not Jason Tatum was their 1A or how if he was a top 5 player in the NBA. I feel like I and many others lost sight of just how dominant this team was and how easy is it for them to get offense. That was the thing that jumped out in the first quarter.
Yeah.
It was so easy for them to get a good shot on every possession.
They're just such a versatile team, and there is no right answer for it, which is why when we see them lose, or at least when we saw them lose in the playoffs, it was because they got cold from 3.
Yeah, which could happen again.
Yeah,
and totally possible.
But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen 4 out of the next 6 games. So that's the problem for the Mavs and for you and people who selected the Mavs. But
I'll jump ship. Don't make me.
Yeah, don't jump ship yet. I think they have answers for everything. Like there isn't. They never felt labored, and it was like, okay, we're going to trap Tatum out of these screens. Okay, fine. We'll hit Derek White, and he'll pull up and hit shots. And then when it gets to the point where Kristaps is pulling from the sticker, which he did a couple of times just for fun, and they're hitting that too, then it's a problem. So I guess there's some of his stuff that's like randomness that you don't expect to happen all the time. Hauser with the catch and shoot that JJ Redick almost fell out of his chair for because he
didn't dip the ball.
He didn't dip the ball. Those type of shots are things that you can't always count on. So it might be closer, and maybe you'll see a different version of the Celtics. But then they force the switch, and Kristaps can shoot over people, and maybe he'll hit those at a lower rate. But it's just the fact of the matter is they're going to get good opportunities. There's no way to eliminate them from getting good opportunities on the offensive end. And then when you look on the defensive end, I don't know how the Mavs are going to create as many good chances. So it just feels tough.
If I were to whisper to you, just a whisper.
Okay.
Maybe Jaylen Brown is the Celtics' real number 1.
I mean, I would plug my ear.
Would you clutch your pearls, or would you maybe be like, tell me a little bit more about the research you've done on this topic?
I mean, I would clutch my pearls and then say, tell me a little bit more about the research you've done on this topic, because he did win the MVP of the conference finals, the Larry Bird Award, and he played really well tonight. But some of this feels like it's a reaction to how defenses treat Jason Tatum.
Just asking questions.
Okay.
I'm just like, it is weird that okay.
Did you tease research that you don't have is the question.
No. Of course, I didn't do any actual research. So, I mean, the Tatum dialogue is really weird because I think it's like broken people's brain that you have someone who is competing for championships every year who's not on the level of the guys we normally see who are competing for championships every single year. But he certainly didn't help his case when they were able to doo-doo stomp the Mavericks. And he is essentially a non-factor offensively. I know he rebounded. I know he played defense. Right. He probably ended up with 15 points or however many.
It just looks different than what we're accustomed to.
Yeah. And Jaylen Brown's playing the best basketball of his career directly next to him on both sides of the ball.
And using his left hand. Take that, haters.
As JJ called it, tween cross dunk.
JJ's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have to give you some credit here, is you made this point before the playoffs started, is that the Celtics remind you of the Pistons, who were like a strength in numbers type of team, which was hard for us to accept because we had been like pounded into our head that Jason Tatum is like the next Kevin Durant for a while, and we had to accept that like that is not the way this team is going to be constructed, and it's different than what we're accustomed to, but it damn sure is no less dominant. It's more dominant than just about anything we've seen. So
it's amazing. I'm looking forward to game 2. I think it's going to be Luka is too good, and Kyrie will be way less passive for every game to go this way.
I'm not sure that that's true, but I think game 2 will be a lot more competitive. But they can't do it 4 times in 6. All right, appreciate you, Charlie. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Talk some more basketball in NFL. All right, we're back on the Domonique Foxworth Show. We're going to get to some football in a second, but first, Dan Hurley is up to something. Charlie, what's he doing?
Yeah, so it has been reported by Woj that the Lakers are preparing a massive offer for Danny Hurley. There's been excitement about him being one of the best coaches ever in college basketball. I think that's fair to say. And tactically, he has run an incredibly advanced NBA level offense at UConn. Now he could be the Lakers head coach. We're taping this on Thursday night. I guess it's conceivable he could have signed by the time that you're listening to this, one way or the other. But I want to ask you, Domonique, what would you do if you were Danny Hurley? Would you stay at UConn or leave to go to the Lakers?
So first of all, if I was Danny Hurley, I would tell you that I go by Dan Hurley now. I'm not a boy. I think has he called people out saying he's not a Danny, he's a Dan now?
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Dan.
Oh, yeah, get my name right. So he's off back-to-back national championships and dominating performances at UConn, and he's on pace, or he could potentially get a third one, which will put him up there in John Wooden territory.
Last coach to three-peat, yeah.
Yeah, which John Wooden won like 11 or something. He's doing Bill Russell numbers, so he won't catch that. But in the modern era, he could put together a legacy like Mike Krzyzewski, like one of those guys. That's something to entertain on one side. Then on the other side, it's go coach LeBron and AD in Los Angeles.
Maybe LeBron.
Yeah, maybe LeBron. And maybe coach two LeBrons if you get LeBron Jr. and AD in Los Angeles at a team that I think is probably not quite as close as they think they are. So it seems pretty obvious to me. And it's hard when you say what you think a person should do because you can't get into their head. But it seems obvious to me, given all the circumstances, that I would advise Dan Hurley to take the job. And I think that's probably counterintuitive, but we have to appreciate how topsy-turvy the NCAA and college sports is right now and how difficult the job probably is. He's doing it well. I think a lot of people want to put the money into making this calculation. I'll take it out.
He's going to get a massive raise from UConn even if he stays.
The money's not going to be an issue. The question is, it's really about what you care about in the long run. So there's two things. Go to the NBA and potentially succeed and become one of the better coaches in the NBA, which I think is preferable. Preferable to him, preferable to everyone. Stay in college, and there's a higher percentage chance that you can be one of the greater college coaches of all time. Those are probably the top two options. Why not take the risk at the top job? And I also think the big thing, like the topsy-turvy nature of the NCAA suggests that the game is changing there. And it's not even static. It's not steady yet. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know who's going to be getting paid. We don't know what the conferences are going to be. We don't know where the money's going to come from. And frankly, you don't know what your job's going to be. That's another thing when it comes to being a college coach. Yeah. Presumably, you get into coaching because you want to coach. And it seems like, and this is real old man take territory for me, but it seems like they don't have as much time to coach because they're recruiting. And then they're recruiting the players that are on their roster to keep them there. It just does not seem like an appealing job. You're managing a salary cap at the same time with the NIL money, and you don't know what the future holds. So it seems obvious. The only reason I would argue that he shouldn't go to the NBA is if it was just going to be an abject failure, which then it's not that bad because he's going to come back to college and get as much money as he wants in just about any job he wants. But there's a chance that he could go to the NBA and fail like just about every other college coach that went to the NBA, with the exception of, I guess, Brad Stevens.
There have been some successes and failures from guys going from college to the NBA. Billy Donovan's done a good job in the NBA. I mean, not to the Brad Stevens level. And, of course, the flameouts of, whether it's Calipari or Rick Pitino, who flamed out very quickly. But do you think the Lakers do a good job? It's obviously one of the prestige franchises in NBA history. You're in LA. You have seemingly a direct path to have a superstar at your team at all times. It's also an organization that has been chaotic for the last, I don't know, since 2011.
I don't think the Lakers' job is as good as it once was, especially with the new salary cap and second apron rules, combined with the fact that Steve Ballmer owns the other team. This Lakers organization does not have a bottomless well of money. And while LA is probably always going to be an attractive location for free agents, if you ain't got the money and you can't afford to pay the multiple-time luxury tax penalties that are going to come with going after big stars, I'm not sure that the Lakers is as good a situation as you would think, which would make me think that the Lakers would be more attracted to somebody like Dan Hurley, who does have a reputation for being a good player development, because it seems like more and more as we move closer to a hard cap, which is frankly what we are doing in the NBA, is we're moving closer to a hard cap. It's going to be more important to find edges in the way that you have to in the NFL, which is like find a rookie quarterback or find a player on a cheap contract, find a coach that can get you a schematic advantage for a couple of weeks here and there. Develop new schemes, steal some from college. That hasn't been historically how I view the NBA, where it's more like get all the best players and you'll be all right. It seems like we're going to a place where there's so much talent in the NBA, and the new luxury tax penalties is going to force that talent to be more widely dispersed in the league, that having someone who has the pedigree and the ability of a Dan Hurley, which is suggesting that he will have success in the NBA, might be a slight advantage like it is to have Coach Spoelstra or somebody like that. I mean, not nearly on that level, but potentially.
Yeah, I mean, good coaching in the NBA is a proxy for one of your hobby horses, which is institutional stability. Yeah. Good organizations have good coaches and like a good organizational structure where players learn and develop and run organized offense. Look, Dan Hurley is a great basketball coach. Didn't call him Danny. Almost did it. Almost slipped out. I mean, Dan is a great basketball coach. When we talked about, I think it was right after the national championship, we might have on this show talked about whether or not he should want to stay at UConn forever, whether it was going to another blue blood or going to the NBA. And at the time, I said, just go be Nick Saban of college basketball. Like, that's on the table. You're so far ahead of everyone. Why do you want to leave that job? Well, it's to your point. It's NIL.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the college could have a super league. There could be the Big Ten and the SEC, and the Big East could be a couple years away from being the Patriot League if Dan Hurley leaves. They could get squeezed out of tournament spots. The NCAA tournament could be largely built around those conferences, which have not been basketball powerhouse conferences compared to the Big East and the ACC historically. But that's something that's on the table. So if your stock has never been hotter, I think you have to take the Lakers job.
Yeah, your stock's never been higher, and it's likely never going to get higher.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to go up even further if you win the third championship. Like, there's nothing else. I guess you could wait.
Well, it would. If we won a third in a row, it'd be pretty cool.
I mean, it's not going to change the way that we view him. I mean, it'd be cool, but I don't think that it makes him a more impressive candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah. But either way.
I mean, it's an extended streak of dominance.
Yeah, which he's already had. It gets even longer. They're not going to put an extra M on that contract because of that. But he could. The argument for staying, in my view, is only to wait for a better opportunity to move to the NBA.
From the Lakers side, I think it's interesting. It's been reported from a lot of people that LeBron told the Lakers for their coaching process, because this has all been bantered about since we thought JJ Redick was going to be the head coach. Oh, that was yesterday.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the podcast with LeBron and JJ, and people thought LeBron was meddling. But even during that, it was reported that LeBron told them he's not involved. Don't make a decision based on me. Based on the future, not just next season, and on Anthony Davis. What about that statement do you find interesting? Could we be getting Shabazz Napiered here with his excitement about Dan Hurley?
I mean, he said the opposite of that. Like, I don't understand. And so I'm guilty of making all these ridiculous, like, red yarn on the corkboard theories of how LeBron is doing this because he wants the team to draft his son so Dan Hurley can develop him.
Which, by the way, would be a better development. Getting under Dan Hurley would be better for his development than pretty much anywhere else in college basketball.
Agreed. I'm with you.
Even if his son's not a real prospect.
I'm with you on how interesting and fun this is. But why can't LeBron just be being honest this time? Like, I don't see.
Come on.
Okay, I don't see this as a perfect, great hire for LeBron James. Like, I think he understands that if he puts his thumb on the scale, it's not something that he can hide. Like, there are plenty of people in the organization who will say he put his thumb on the scale. I think he understands that it does not benefit him to shape this team in a model that is best suited for him at this point in his career. Like, he's not dumb. He's made some mistakes, but he's savvy, and especially when it comes to media. Like, I see this as an honest situation. I think that there are some times when he sets us up and he sends us down the path that he wants us to go down. But I think this time he is honest in saying that you guys should make the decision that is best for this organization because I am no longer that guy.
Or he just wants to guilt-free leave in like a month and a half.
Yeah, which would be different from the Sebastian Napier situation, which is where he tweeted out about how he liked Napier, that he drafted him, and then he left.
Yeah.
And it was a guilty leave if he had any guilt at all.
Well, I mean, he's been effusive in his praise of Hurley as well. Yeah, I mean, I think Hurley, actually, I think having a coach that's that organized is something that would be the best for LeBron. I don't think having a LeBron simp as his coach is something that has worked. The most organized offense he's played on was Spoelstra in Miami, and in the national championship game, UConn ran 89% of their offensive possessions were organized sets, and it's a read and react system with a bunch of different things. It's not like he's out there going like Thibodeau and calling plays over and over again. Like, this is someone who builds a system that can function really well. And when LeBron's not the queen on the chessboard the same way that he was, where he could just make every single decision, being coached hard, having someone to develop the rest of the roster is probably what's best for him.
Yeah. I think we failed to talk about one other aspect of Dan Hurley taking the job is the pressure. And I mean, he's spoken about having panic attacks in the past. Many people have written about his intense coaching. Like, we've seen him. So there's a couple different angles of that. It's one, dealing with NBA players, which I actually don't think is going to be a problem. And then there's the other angle of being a dominant college coach in UConn is entirely different than struggling to stay out of the play-in game in Los Angeles, the most covered team with the potentially greatest player of all time on your team. Like, that is a pressure cooker.
Player of all time.
What?
Second best player of all time.
I said potentially.
Yeah.
I save room for you, LeBron. I mean, you, Jordan.
I love LeBron. Just respect the GOAT.
I respect him.
Respect him.
LeBron's better.
Respect Michael.
I mean, if you had to draft one player to start an organization with, give me young LeBron.
I'll take Jordan. Anyway, about Dan Hurley. There's some interesting things about who he is. You talked about the pressure with that stuff and the panic attacks. I'm not going to speculate on the long term of his mental health if he's coaching a team that's, there's not much that. I mean, I guess you can look at it either way. There's not that much pressure when you're not competing for a championship. I think it's interesting how Hurley recreated himself as a basketball coach, because this is someone who was a defensive first coach who hated analytics and wasn't a great coach, and remade himself into someone who is a completely different, like, EuroLeague style of offense, where it's egalitarian and moving the ball, to succeed at a college level, and has incredibly well. I think this guy is smart enough to know that the way he's a maniac on the sideline is not going to transfer into the NBA. Like, if you're willing to change your entire style, you're willing to do that. So you're standing on the sideline. Like, I don't think we would see the same Dan Hurley. And the second part about that is most college coaches couldn't do what Dan Hurley did, and that's why they fail in the NBA. They have their system, they install their system, and they treat NBA players like college kids. This is someone who's been malleable to succeed.
The second part is more convincing than the first part. So, like, I agree with you, and I think he's likely going to be able to adjust to the way that you talk and treat NBA players. But the argument on the other side is, you can't just change. These are high-pressure situations. Like, people don't just change. You don't just all of a sudden become a cool, calm customer on the sideline when you haven't been that at any point in your career. I think he can, in part because he's going to be looking at people that he respects a lot more, or he respects their understanding and opinion and position more than I think he does 18, 19, 20-year-old kids in college. So I think he'll be able to pull it off. Ultimately, I think I agree with you, but I'm not sure that it's because he's going to make it, or he's made himself into a new person and he can continue to make himself into a new person. I think he's changed some of his coaching philosophies, but the fire's not going anywhere. Like, he's still going to be incredibly angry. But I mean, we all have experienced this. We get angry at our boss, you get angry at your parents, and you respond to them a different way than you would someone that you consider like more of a peer. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. It's like, obviously he's not going to talk to AD or LeBron the way that he would talk to, I don't know, any
Cam Spencer?
Yeah, your man Cam Spencer.
My man? I thought he was your guy.
Boy's Latin.
Do you think this is a death knell for like the Big East in college basketball if he leaves?
Definitely for the Big East.
Like this is they've lost Roy Williams, Coach K, Jay Wright. If they lose Dan Hurley, not Danny.
This all just signals to the thing that I was saying earlier, is that it seems unstable, and instability is exciting if you're on the bottom of a pyramid, because you're like, man, this shit'll shake up and maybe I'll find myself a new position at the top, or I'll find a new way to compete. If you're at the top of it,
yeah,
and it's like, I don't know, it's all stable.
He's unstable. The only one who adjusted to the unstable world.
Right. He has adjusted to the unstable world, but the problem is the world has not yet stabilized.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. Like, we don't know. There's Supreme Court cases going on right now that will still define what's going to happen going forward. So, he's adjusted and had success in the instability. When it finally stabilizes, it may not be a world that he wants to exist in.
I wouldn't say
NBA ain't going to change.
Yeah, I would say it's not just that he's adjusted to the unstable world. He's taken advantage of it.
Right.
Better than anyone.
Right.
Like, he's been opportunistic in a landscape where there aren't great coaches who are leading the great programs in the same way. And it's not the same space where you just get 5 stars and win with 5 stars and one and dones.
This has to be obviously not something that the NCAA would do, but college basketball in general needs to get together the money to keep him there. Because, the game has
a union. They need a coaches union to pay Danny Hurley.
I mean, it's funny, but let's think about this. College basketball is like anything else in sports. It needs protagonists and storylines. The history of college sports, the main protagonists and the main characters and storylines have been around coaches, because the only people that are there long enough for us to know and care about. He's the biggest one. Yeah. Them going for a three-peat, the biggest story. If they could go undefeated next season, a big story. It gives me
undefeated.
I'm throwing it out there. I mean, they're in the Big East. Who's going to knock them off? Georgetown? So people like me who appreciate basketball but's not going to watch just a regular season college basketball game, I would tune in to watch UConn.
Yeah.
And when the tournament starts, it's going to be a lot more hype around a tournament if we have UConn chasing a three-peat. Yeah. And so this is terrible and also just this signaling or perpetuating this position that all the great coaches are taking, that this ain't really for us. But it's just signaling to everyone that this is not where you want to be. This is not interesting. This is not fun. This is not where greatness will be found. And it sucks for college basketball.
All right, we're going to talk some football. I don't know if you heard this, but Justin Jefferson, he's really good, signed a massive deal with the Minnesota Vikings, record-setting deal, and sets the table for several other number one receivers to want as much, more, similar money, whether it's Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins, Cowboys with CeeDee, 49ers with Aiyuk. It's creating something that's interesting. Receivers have never been more valuable. They're being paid like they're the second most important position on the field after quarterbacks. But is that a bubble? Because there are more good receivers coming into the NFL every single year. It's not to say these guys are disposable. You're not getting another Justin Jefferson. You're not. But if you're team building, do you think it is the right move to be paying these guys just a bit less than quarterbacks? Or is that something that restricts the way you can build a team and is maybe not worth it?
So, as you know, absolute rules are dumb.
Yeah,
but in this situation, I think it's a perfect example to demonstrate that, because it depends on where you are as a team. It depends on who the player is that you're talking about. Justin Jefferson, there's no questions asked. You have to pay someone in that tier.
Yeah.
You have to pay them whatever the market is plus $1.
He's basically been the best receiver ever through the first several years.
And anyone who is of that caliber, there's no questions asked. You pay him what he deserves, which is the number one contract at his position plus $1. That's what you do. Then there's other guys who are legitimate number ones, but not Hall of Fame track guys. Again, those are guys who I think, you kind of have to pay them whatever the number one receiver is, and maybe you can use Justin Jefferson, but you ain't Justin Jefferson, to knock him down a little bit, but around there. But then there's another tier of receivers that it becomes a problem, and I'd say more times than not, you have to not pay that guy and move on from him. But I think the circumstance matters because I think Brandon Aiyuk, I know his advanced stats point to him being on a higher tier.
Separates better than everyone in the league. Yeah.
On a higher tier than his actual on-field stats suggest. But he falls pretty close to that line where I would say that you pay those guys depending on what position your team is in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't afford to lose them because you can't afford to take the risk of going through the draft or trying to go through free agency. Because at the crux of the point that you're making is we seem to be able to find.
I'm not making any points. Just
the crux, the reason why this is an interesting question is because it's basic supply and demand.
Yeah,
it feels like we're getting more and more good receivers every year coming through the draft, which is a fair risk to take in your team building until you find a guy like Justin Jefferson that you can't move on from. So I don't feel like I didn't give you a clear one-way answer, but I think it does because I'm thinking about the receivers in the market right now, and I don't feel the same way about all of them.
Of course. There has to be nuance with all this stuff.
I'm sorry. One more thing that came into my mind is this is also NFL's front office best practices coming back to bite them in the a little bit because they use position to depress a lot of guys' value. And they're like, well, this is the position that you play, not the impact that you have on our team. This is the position that you play, so we're going to pay you based on the market for that position. And it always worked to their advantage. But there's going to come a time when there are some receivers who are technically, I'm the number one receiver on your team. It's like in the NBA. You got to give me a max deal. Even if I'm Bradley Beal, I'm your best player. You got to give me a max deal, and that makes it harder for everyone else. But there are occasionally running backs who deserve to get paid like they are the pivotal piece in the offense. Sometimes it's a tackle, and sometimes on defense it's a defensive end, and sometimes it's Aaron Donald, sometimes it's a corner, sometimes it's a safety. So it's kind of messed up how it works out, but it does feel like there are going to be some receivers that get paid more than their value is to the team, which I love.
What I think is interesting about this from a team building perspective is we have talked for I don't know how long about the value of the rookie quarterback contract.
Right.
Well, rookie quarterbacks still improve a lot. Most of them don't win on their rookie deal.
Right.
Rookie receivers are much closer to rookie contract receivers are often some of their best years, and they're much closer to finished products.
Right.
I think there's a really good chance that we're going to look at the way that Green Bay has rebuilt this on the fly with guys picked even outside the first round by finding stud after stud after stud receiver to put around Jordan Love for cheap, where I think teams are going to be really willing to try and build a receiver room of guys on first deals.
Yeah.
Much more than they were in the past, particularly if the other side of it is paying guys $35 million a year and tying up a significant portion of your cap. Obviously, if you get a Justin Jefferson or a prime Tyreek Hill, that's obviously you pay that guy because you can win the Super Bowl with them. We've seen skill position players completely transform offenses, like Christian McCaffrey. But that brings up a point. You talk about positions depressing values. McCaffrey's incredibly underpaid for San Francisco.
Of course.
$30 million guaranteed. Debo has $58 million guaranteed on his deal. He's sort of better than Debo at everything.
He's more important to their offense.
But he's also just as good of a receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he's more important to their offense. And I think the Aiyuk contract is the most interesting of the ones.
Ooh, I was going to say Tyreek.
You think Tyreek is more interesting? Okay. I mean, I think the Tyreek
let's start with Aiyuk.
Yeah.
What makes it the most interesting to you?
Well, I think Aiyuk is interesting because of Kyle Shanahan.
Yes.
And I think that if there was someone that I thought, I mean, there's a couple coaches like this, but not a lot. He might be the best where as you know, I believe that all the players in the NFL are good. I think that some coaches enter their team building saying that they need certain types of players. If they can't find those types of players, then it's hard to have success. That's obviously true of Kyle Shanahan also. But I think his types of players and the adaptability of his offense is broader. Mm-hmm. So even if you argue that Brandon Aiyuk is on a level where you should have to pay him, I think you have a situation where you might be more likely to not necessarily find a replacement, but find other receivers that do things well and have a coach that is good enough at implementing and smart enough to adapt the offense on the fly so that there isn't much loss there. Which, like, it changes the way that you approach this.
That's interesting because the 49ers are a team that I want to talk about because they're so all in. They're sort of in win now mode with the contracts with all of their skill guys. They have an incredible defense, and they're able to do that because of Purdy's rookie contract. Presumably, they're going to pay him. I mean, it'd be the ballsiest decision ever to move on from him at some point when he's been rock solid. So do you think the 49ers need to keep this group together longer than this year? Or with someone like Shanahan, is this something where you can rebuild on the fly and continue to compete for Super Bowls? They're the favorite right now. Yeah. Obviously, that's mostly because of the conference, not because of them over the Chiefs.
They've managed to be competitive throughout all of this while not having stability at the most important position in football. You think they can't do that if they change out some receivers? Like, I think one thing that gets underappreciated when we talk about the 49ers is how good their defense has been. And that's part of the reason why they've been able to hang around and be successful even when they were going through some quarterback issues. And they've seemed to come out on the other side of that with a franchise quarterback in Purdy. So that is over. I have a hard time imagining that their offense is going to fall into some hole as long as they have the connection between John Lynch in the front office and Kyle Shanahan and a quarterback that seems to be able to execute this offense. Yeah. And, the defense is pretty straightforward and simple, and I see them being able to stay competitive.
It's going to be so funny 8 years from now. It's going to be 2032, and we're going to be sitting here, and we're going to be refreshing Twitter or X or whatever it's imploded into at that point. And people are still going to be complaining in week 8 that Brock Purdy's has the shortest odds to be MVP. It's going to be great.
Yeah. He'll win one. No, he probably won't win.
No, it's just, it's going to be an annual tradition around Halloween.
I thought you were
Brock Purdy's the MVP leader.
I thought you were going to say that Kyle Shanahan will be in another Super Bowl, but have not won one yet.
Oh my God. If that's the case, he'll just be sitting, staring out at the East River with Kendall Roy.
Poor guy. Yeah, no, I like that team. What's so interesting to you about the Tyreek Hill?
Well, he's one of the best receivers of all time, who's seemingly at the top of his game every single year. But he's a 30-year-old, 5'10" receiver his game is predicated on literally being the fastest guy we've maybe ever seen on a football field. And you kind of have to pay the guy, but wouldn't that be terrifying? This is what the Chiefs just went through, and they moved on from him. Like, they knew how good he was, and that makes it complicated.
Yeah, it's tough. He's super talented. Why do they have to pay him? Like,
they don't.
Yeah, you said you kind of have to pay the guy. I mean,
the Chiefs didn't. I guess I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah,
based on performance, he's earned money. He's earned
the Chiefs. Yeah, the Chiefs is a unique situation,
yeah.
But I'm trepidatious about committing to Tyreek Hill, not only because it's on the field stuff, but it does always feel like there's something happening around Tyreek Hill that is concerning. Like, he's getting surprise divorces that he didn't even know about. There's fights on boats. There's all types of stuff popping. There's houses burning down. Or not burning down, but houses catching on fire.
There's a run blocking drill with an Instagram model.
This has just been the last couple years.
I think this has been like the last year.
Yeah, I said couple to try to cover myself, but it's just like those things. That's a lot of smoke combined with the fact that he's getting older. And I guess we don't know how good Mike McDaniel is out without Tyreek Hill, but I might want to figure it out if I was the Dolphins, because that's a tough thing to commit to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's why I feel like that's less difficult for me than anything else.
Well, it is, but it's just like anytime Tyreek Hill is on the field for the Dolphins, they have like historically great offense.
Yeah, I feel you. But I mean, the way the rules have been shifted, like, he's not going to hold out. Like, well, actually, he of all people might hold out.
So the last one is CeeDee.
Yeah.
And that actually is a bigger Cowboys conversation.
Yeah.
They're in cap hell.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this to troll you.
No, I know. I've looked at this.
Yeah.
I know I'm not being trolled.
And like, they've been really good every single year. they have a good roster, but they have Zach Martin, who might retire after the season. They have Prescott, who might want $70 million, who's probably going to get it because he's been a top 10 quarterback for a long time and is entering his prime. You have Parsons, Micah Parsons. I've never talked to Chandler Parsons once. Me and Luka Doncic are the same. Micah Parsons, and they're in cap hell. So it's kind of the question. Is it now or never for the Cowboys?
You laid out all the bad things about their situation.
With great players.
Yeah, with great players. However, you did not lay out what I think is the worst thing is they don't have an alternative.
Yeah.
They have to go all in. Like, there really is no other choice because the other option would be rebuild. Okay, we're going to rebuild. So how do we rebuild? The best way to rebuild is to take your most valuable asset and pull a Herschel Walker, which they did, trade that asset and get a bunch of stuff. That would be Dak Prescott. He has a no-trade clause.
He'll hit free agency next year.
Yeah, and he can hit free agency next year. There's no motivation for him to cooperate with your no-trade clause. You have two incredible players at marquee positions, and they're young, Micah and CeeDee. You're going to pay them. Same thing with Diggs. You already paid him. Like, the light at the end of the tunnel being the Super Bowl seems further than it was the last couple of years, but it seems closer by going all in on what you got now than it does by moving on because you don't have any assets to move. You could just go try to find a quarterback in a draft. And
are we going to look up next year and there's going to be like a tweet from Adam Schefter with a graphic that has like Trey Lance QB1?
Nah, I'm out on that one, man. I don't believe yeah, there might be a graphic, but I don't think it's going to happen. Like, given Trey Lance's history or limited history as a football player and his very limited success lack of success in the NFL, I don't see it happening. Like, it would be so funny. And like week 4, there'd be the Schefter graphic that's just benched in the same font. Yeah.
Put them directly next to each other.
But yeah, they've drafted really well, but their decision offseason after offseason to play games with their superstars, or at least, I don't want to say play games because I don't know what's going on, but their decision or their inability, I guess is bad because it might be the players also, their inability to lock up their guys early is coming back to bite them. Like, it goes back to.
This is a Foxworth Show maxim.
It is.
Pay the guys early before the cap gets crazier.
And yes, that, and also don't get in a situation where you have a quarterback that has you over the barrel. Mm-hmm. Like, he has a no trade, a no franchise clause, and you owe him $60 million against the cap. You have to give him whatever the hell he wants, all because you were acting like jerks when everyone in the whole country was like, hey, yeah, Dak Prescott, at the very least, is a top 10 quarterback. He's pay your guy the money. And they were like, nah, I don't know. We'll see. And what did they get out of this? Like, what did they gain? They gained nothing. They just put themselves in a terrible situation for an organization that, while we talk bad about Jerry Jones, it's been one of the more well-run, better scouting and drafting and more like stable organizations of anyone in football. But that every offseason, it's just like, what the hell are they doing? All right, Charlie, that was fun. Good times. Thank you for being here. You were awesome. Also, thank you to all my great producers, Megan, Serafina, Brian, Kevin, and Tez. Shout out to Podville. I love you. And we out. Oh, yeah. Rate, review, download, subscribe.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.